Thank you very much for joining us on the Modern Job Search Checklist with your weekly show where we get into the practical side of the career and job search spectrum. And hopefully, we'll be able to help you with your job search as the three of us are going to try to parse and make sense of all that is going on and relate to what's going on this week. We're talking about positioning yourself for the now and the future. So if you're looking at your job search for now, we encourage you not just look for now. You want to also look for what's going to look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, if possible. Anyway, we usually stream to LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So please join us. We'll be glad to interrupt what we're talking about to talk about what you want to talk about in the chat. So on any platform that you see us on, feel free to join us in the discussion, lend comments, opinions, advice, especially if you're a career professional. Say hi to us in the chat. We welcome you to join us and be a part of as much as we are. Damian Birkel is my regular co-host. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Good deal. Glad you're joining us all the way from North Carolina.
Mhm.
It's not as cold as it here is Illinois, and I'll always be envious of you for that, of course. Uh, and joining us as our guest today, back on the show's Erica Reckamp. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We're going to jump into it, something that we're going to kind of stay on the same topic, but we're going to talk a little bit about the jobs numbers that was just released early this morning. So we know that there are more than 500,000 jobs that were added in October. That's twice as many plus as it was back in September. And here are the cities that are the top ranking as far as the job, the jobs are booming. This is where it's happening supposedly. Dallas, Fort Worth area, Austin, Round Rock area, Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale, and these are all tri-cities, no less. If every city except one, Denver, and Aurora, Lakewood, and then Houston, and the Woodlands and Sugarland. All those areas are booming in the market, and probably I want to go to Damien because Damien, before the show, brought up a very interesting observation based on some discussions he had. And join us in the chat to tell us where it is, where you are, and where you're at. In Chicago, job market is always very up or is very down. Right now, it's kind of simmering in the down, trending downwards. Damien, you had an observation that's happening.
Yeah, I did. I was talking to, there's a loose consortium of folks that run support groups, rather, across America. And we kind of exchange back and forth trends on, or through rather, LinkedIn. And a conversation that I had was, especially in one major metro area, uh, who will remain nameless, but you do associate ears with that.
Okay.
Tough clue.
Yeah, I
Right.
know, I know, I know. I set the bar really
Right.
high.
Yeah.
Uh, but the conversation we were having was about how many IT folks were there and how much trouble they were having, and that led to us talking about the for lack of a better term, those who have become invisible because they
Hmm.
have fallen off of unemployment. And what
Hmm.
most people don't know is if you are no longer counted by the Employment Security Commission or whatever it's called in your state, then you're no longer in that percentage, the
Metrics.
actual
Yeah.
unemployment rate. Now it's accounted for in another area where it talks about underemployed or not working. But my point is, or where we went was, the term information technology is too broad, and the conversation kind of sprouted out from there, basically saying that uh, you need to basically specialize within your field and be able to tell a person exactly what it is that you do. Are you in security? or are you in the networking portion of information technology? And if you brand yourself too widely, then yeah, you could be struggling unnecessarily by not marketing to a very specific niche in your general uh, geographic area. And now with everything that's gone on with COVID, there are many positions where you can cyber relocate, meaning work for a company that's not in your area anymore.
Which is
So
very common in tech, right?
yes, yes, exactly. So the bottom line is take a look at how you are marketing yourself and ask yourself, have I whittled my area down to a point where I would appeal to a specific area within your general area of expertise?
IT is extra tricky too because the skills time out more quickly, right? In terms of what's relevant, it's not just the most recent 15 years, it might only be the most recent 10 years that you'd be covering. What you talked about in terms of positioning is so important. What type of IT are you devoting your career to and your attention to? And the other thing is, IT is far more susceptible to age discrimination. And particularly, you saying that it's coming from Florida, that makes me a little suspicious. They're widening their candidate pool to national or global and saying these people can work remotely. That's going to be really tough for, if it is somebody who's over 40, over 50, and their skills might be a little stagnated. That's going to be a tougher row to hoe.
Well, I have so many layers of thoughts from what both of you just said. I'll just try to tackle one at a time and I'll come back to you. But the thing is, yes, observation, I hate the saying that, the riches are in the niches, but I'm afraid that's where the demand is as well. The demand is in the specific areas where you can be very marketable and but also very useful to the company. It's sort of like saying these days saying that you're in IT now. It's like saying that you were in management information systems back in the 2000s. It's like the tech joke is, okay, that was your degree, but what do you really do? And I think that's what and I think one of the things about marketing that we have to get straight and job seekers have to get straight is you've got to figure out and you got to learn how to take the thinking out of the person that is looking for the job, looking to fill the job, out of their hands about you. I mean, you got to market in a way that people look at your profile on LinkedIn, look at your Twitter to see what you talk about, look at and really what you say in your first few words on any of those profiles or your resume, that summary statement, that beginning branding statement that is right there, right at the top. You got to be able to say everything you need that someone needs to know for why they need to hire you in that little bit of time. That means people's and the hiring managers time is now, being that there's so many people that are saturated in the job market from many different angles, whether you look at it from the not the right type of jobs, but not find the right
Right.
people, or having the right kind of jobs, and the people don't are not communicating and articulating where they fit in. Those are the two basic problems that people have with their marketing, is that they're not reaching in a way that is targeting specific employers. I mean, if you really want to target the largest employer, and I bet you if you could target that one and get some feedback, you'll learn how to trickle that down to the smaller ones, maybe, and that's where you need to go. Damien?
Absolutely. And if you're struggling, ask, go out, meet people. And I know we're
Mhm.
still kind of pandemic meeting the flu, uh, and it may be more difficult to talk to people in person, but you can certainly do it through uh, Zoom. You can connect with people through LinkedIn
Mhm.
and and get opinions from people who are out there. Um, Another thing is when you talk about niches, uh, yes, you have to be current, but something that's very interesting to me is there were two major banks in this area that have since gone to Charlotte. But what they were looking for were legacy programmers because their systems had not been updated. Things had been layered on top, but the
Mm,
baseline programming was still there. Once those folks that I worked with figured that out, they specifically marketed to that unmet need and were
perfect.
hired. So my point is yes, be relevant. Make sure that you have the right skills to match today's market, but don't forget that out there somewhere, there may be somebody looking for an old skill that you have. Now, that's not something that you highlight, that's just something to keep in mind because the bottom line when it comes to job searching is three words: be the answer. Be the answer to the employer's needs. And if you cannot demonstrate that, as Mark said in your career summary, and across all the various areas where a recruiter or an HR manager would touch, then struggle, unnecessary struggle, is going to be a part of your job search when in fact if you step back a little bit, think strategically, and then go out and talk to people in the field that are actually looking for people, then you can make the revisions to your job search strategy that will hopefully move you forward much quicker than you are right now.
Right. Or tying those key qualifiers into your cover letter. Maybe it, like you said, maybe it's not appropriate to highlight it in more general content. Like if you are you don't necessarily want to highlight it on your LinkedIn profile, or you might not want to put it in a public facing resume if you are using job boards. Not that many of us would recommend hanging out there for too long, but some people do leverage that. But then maybe customizing it when you're doing submitting to the company or speaking directly to the hiring manager.
And that's something to be said about using job boards these days because really the worst job descriptions I usually see are on job boards. And they're written so
Give you
vaguely it's
nothing.
like you just wonder what is it people who say they have success what are they having success with, them being really vague, or do they really, or are they constantly changing their summary and their profiles? I mean, I don't know which one it is. In some degrees, I don't care because I think everything has been tried, and still there are a small amount, no matter who you listen to, are
Right.
actually having all the success. And in fact, I remember there was a few years ago there was this guy that was going all over LinkedIn, friending every professional and many of my colleagues and you guys colleagues, and they were saying, well, there's nothing wrong with job boards. He did that for about 1 year and then disappeared forever.
Oh, yeah, it didn't work.
It's like this is what you're going to go with, really? I wanted to come on my podcast and come on my platform to talk about this. I wasn't going. That was not going to happen. As soon as he said job boards, that was a discussion that was going to be passing. But I
Yeah,
was interested in seeing him prove this, which, of course, how are you going to prove it? But all in all, to say that ultimately, it's for some people, yes, I understand it is. Companies don't know what they want.
right.
I get that. That's a big part of it. Also, job seekers need to be clear about what they want. And when you think you're clear, get clearer.
Right.
Uh, and that may mean you having to rewrite your headline, your about sections a few times before
And
getting it. And
testing it.
yeah, that's okay. That means you may need to figure out the keyword situation and all that, but mostly it's the value situation. It's like the value you are bringing. What is it? And is it unique? And what is it about you that's unique that makes you stand out? That's really the bottom line. If you can't prove that, you can't show that, you will be just an informational technology person forever and a day, I'm afraid.
Yes.
Damien, did you want to add any final thoughts to that before we move on?
Yeah, thank you. Boards, at least when I work with people, are simply a guide. And what I mean by that
Hmm.
is if a company's name is attached to that on a job board, I leave the job board and would go directly to the company for two very important reasons. One, um, when we used to post at a company I worked for, when you sign the contract, that is for 30 days of posting, whether the position was filled or
Oh.
not.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so positions on job boards can be stale. They can already have been filled. And so step one is go to the company and make sure that that position is available. And then the other type of position, usually on a job board, is from a recruiter that's
Hmm.
fishing for candidates. And if you want to spend your time doing that, that's okay. But 1% of your time, maybe 5% of your time max, because again, recruiters don't find a job for you. That's not their job. Their
Correct.
job is to fill positions for companies.
Company. Hmm.
And always keep that in mind. Now, along the way, if you make a few friends that are recruiters, that's great. But keep your expectations low because they don't work for you. Nothing wrong.
Hmm.
A lot of great recruiters out there, but keep their function uh, percentage of your time cognizant. Pay attention to that as you're going through your job search so you can allocate your time where you get the maximum bang for your buck.
Yeah. Yep. Erica, you want to add to that?
I think just job boards primarily, they're best for finding out who has a hiring budget.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Pretty much. And you know that's a great point because there are a lot of companies that don't allot, not that they don't have, but they don't allot a marketing budget like that to go on the very expensive job boards. I
Right.
mean, job boards for a company to get
Four
on,
times as
they
much.
they don't get on for free. It costs. And it costs a lot of money now, especially now. I, we could talk about ROI and whether it's worth it. This is not that kind of show, but but we will say that some of them you just kind of wonder how do you make that money back. But anyway, we shall not digress from from this show where we're going here. But having said that, it is something a little bit more relatable. I uh, got to thinking because of an article I let you guys read, which is immaterial, really, ultimately. But there are more companies that are kind of their first. It used to be a point where people would look internally first for a while before they actually tell the world that they're hiring. I don't get the sense that that's the case anymore. I think people are going outside first,
I
and
agree.
then maybe by happenstance, should there's somebody qualified enough to qualify for the position. I just find this a little bit interesting. I mean, Erica is I don't have any evidence to this intel whatsoever, but I just really feel like that there's been a switch now. Are you feeling the same way, or maybe you have something a little bit more concrete to go with than I do?
Well, I agree because I don't think people would be so eager to leave. I think that proof is in the pudding, so to speak.
Right.
They wouldn't be jumping ship if they were being promoted, recognized, given salary increases, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's natural, a cause and effect. In terms of why, that's obviously a lot more tricky. I think it's happened over time. You know, Damien
Yeah.
was saying in some of the notes that he had really enjoyed career progression. And it's as it's become so much more competitive in the market. We are seeing even coaches encouraging people to leave for a raise. We're seeing
Mhm.
people encouraging them to follow their passion, right? It's not enough just to have a job anymore. It has to be, perfectly aligned with the stars. And then we also see a lot of coaches kind of encouraging people to have a mobility mindset,
Mhm.
which if you're even while you're gainfully employed, if you're constantly kind of looking around for like, is there anything better? Is there anything better? That really limits your ability to build traction internally.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, it does, and I have so many feelings about that, and I have a lot of feelings about how career coaches market themselves these days, but I'm not gonna cover it in this particular show. Oh, maybe I will. We'll see where Damien got a little taste the past couple of weeks, but Damien, your thoughts on the idea that perhaps companies are they don't care who they have in their holding slots. They seem to be marketing outside first as opposed to the internal.
And I think to I think that by doing that, that automatically is a way to imply to those that work at the company that you are not valuable enough for us to groom you and sometimes push you up to the next level when we think that you were ready. And I have come from environments where it was encouraged, where there was a policy that said that the position would go up first within your division, and that was for a week, then
Mhm.
within the company for 2 weeks, and then, and only then, could it be posted publicly.
Right.
And usually the preference was always given to the internal candidate. And what that did is that made a fiercely loyal workforce. And there were others, all sorts of other stuff that I'm not going to get into,
Mhm.
that built this learning culture of folks that if a situation happened where there was a mismatch between two people within the organization, over time, a way was found to move them apart so that they weren't at each other's throats for, years.
Mhm.
What I see now is a throwaway view of workforce. And, when you get to a certain age, whatever that age is, it's easy to just cast the person aside and, you know, lay him on the road and let him rust and keep going. And then the other thing that I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of um, turbulence built around Wall Street. And when expectations are not met, then a white knight rides in with his or her own people. And then you have this massive slaughter of the framework of the company, and having people come in that know nothing about the city, the culture, or the company, and then try to get rid of as many people as possible. And I have seen this twice, and I have seen wonderful institutions transformed into dirty, ugly organizations, all because of the fact that the workforce was not valued from the bottom up. And to me, it is such a huge loss, both from a way that people feel when they go into work, but also from the standpoint of good ideas. I mean, many times, some of the best ideas that have gone on to be huge products have come from people within who know the business, have
Mhm.
been in the business, and see something and go, oh, I wonder if. My point being is that you're either in a culture where you as an individual are valued and groomed and moved up, or you're in this culture where it's like every man and woman for themselves. And I've worked in a situation like that.
Hmm.
And frankly, you know, I mean, if I didn't get stabbed today, I would get stabbed tomorrow. I mean, and that is not productive in the way is the way that I feel.
Yeah, the I think this is the dawning of, in part, the dawning of the 1099 W-2 employee that I've talked about, and I think this is going to be the future of work,
Yep.
where everybody is going to be on a lease, not a leash, though we can probably substitute the one for the other, uh, but you're being leased. You're being leased to do a very specific job. After that job is done, if they don't need that job anymore, then you are no longer a part of that company, which really, in essence, as a 1099, you wouldn't necessarily be part of that company because you're not paying insurance, you're not getting paid benefits, you're just getting paid for salary. Hopefully, you're getting paid enough salary to cover your life expenses. Thus, why there's been a movement for the past couple of years where people will have two full-time jobs if they have remote positions.
Yep.
And you get the one that will cover your living, the other one will cover your benefits, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you know, that's where people will kind of have to prepare, and you got to look at your industry and see if it's starting to happen already. You believe me, that's the incubation of something that's going to be a lot bigger overall.
Well,
But
and
I
we've
think,
seen that in IT, right?
yeah,
It's
right.
shifted to consulting.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
And we're going to see it in more areas than just IT. And, you know, I think there is an idea too that, you know, like a sports team, when they get rid of the head coach, they get rid of all the assistant and associate coaches and whoever works with that particular staff. It's going to be the same thing with companies. Companies, whoever the head person is, will have his people. And if he gets fired, everybody else is on the block. Not to say they won't be filling one position, they might be filling several positions. Bringing, I mean, that's where
Yeah.
I'm reimagining it, like they do, and it
There's always
works. And
fallout.
the argument is it works in sports. It works in sports where, you know, you get a new head coach. He brings all of his guys in from, maybe not from top to bottom because the organization is much larger, but everything that's associated with the field on play, whether it's a baseball, basketball court, or football, or soccer, whatever that is, he brings in his guys. It doesn't
Yep.
matter what kind of reputation that they may have. They may have been all losers at the current spot. But because that coach likes them and he's known them for his particular system and his
Oh, God.
systemic ways, that's what he brings in.
Hmm. I see that happening on the Exodus side too, right? When you lose
Right.
one piece of key talent, they have their followers. There's a lot of fallout after that happens. And
Yeah.
with you speaking about the 1099 shift in culture, I see that more likely to happen with remote. I mean, we talk about employees not really having the relationships that they're feeling more willing to leave. That's on the employer side also, in terms of how, why aren't we valuing the people internally? They haven't been in the trenches together.
Right.
They haven't had a chance to build attachment and relationships. They've been
Mhm.
isolated and overworked just the same way as the people who are leaving. So when they're considering, do we want to promote these people? They don't really feel necessarily that affiliation that Damien was talking about that he had
Mhm.
in some of those previous organizations. Or maybe they know they messed up already. They're seeing the writing on the wall. They're seeing how little their employees engage. They're getting their own leadership performance reviews and they're like, wow, this person's out the door. I'm not going to bother trying.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, you just don't know how all of this is going to be said. But having said and done, meantime, while there's this shift, there's this other shift that now companies are treating people as more of disposable parts than
Absolutely.
any other time that we've ever seen. And that's because COVID has brought in the reality that they can't afford to support people's lifestyles or livelihood, so to speak, as a part of the company's um, venture and going forward. In other words, I think insurance is going to be affected, and
Yeah.
infected. Education may be infected or affected depending upon how it all shapes out. But usually, I always say tech companies are copycat companies. The big if the big four go one way, everybody else will come and follow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So true.
we've seen it. We've seen it. We've seen evidence of it. Damien, did you want to add anything to that piece?
Yeah. You talk about one person coming in and making changes. I watched how a person was recruited by the board to come in and run this organization,
Mhm,
and she had brought in within 6 months all of her cronies at ridiculously high salaries, and
mhm,
all the people that had been there for their entire career got flushed out, and their high value employees went from 25 to 100, and their expense structure went through the roof.
mhm,
Now, what nobody knew is that her true issue was to get the place ready for a buyout,
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
which has happened. And all of her high profile buddies were being compensated as if the buyout had already happened. Meanwhile,
mhm,
you had all the local people who didn't know these people, never got a chance to meet these people because they were locked up in the ivory castle. Uh, Now, as a result, uh, lots of people have lost their jobs. More people are getting lined up to lose their jobs,
mhm.
and the company, for all intents and purposes, is gone, and it was one of the leaders in our nation, and it all came down to one person who came in and made the whole thing happen to the detriment of all of the employees and the region that it impacted. So I'm that's just to reinforce what you already said, Mark,
Yeah,
that somebody can come in and just completely wreck an organization based on what they think they're there to do, and they're going to do it their way with their people on their timeline at their cost, regardless of what common sense or any of the people that have been there for a long time say. And those who speak up, of course, are then gone within a month or two.
I would be remiss, Erica, if I didn't mention that the whole idea too that goes to job hopping, that it maybe there's a shift in the way that companies will feel about job hoppers, that they'll see them more as contractors, not particular as somebody who's trying to leech on to salary and then benefits. I think there's an idea where, we all know for years now, and it's really nothing new, the way that you make money is you change jobs. And
Right.
I think that has been that window of opportunity has shortened from, staying 5 years where you can become vested now, where that's no longer a part of the equation, where you're just job hopping because it's better to get a 10% uh, raise as
Bump.
a market exchange, basic market exchange, as opposed to 2.5% you might get through the company if they're doing raises at that particular time. So thus, companies may not be expecting people to want to be promoted like they did in the past.
I wonder. I do think it depends on your industry. Like we were saying in tech, it's
Tech is
more
different. Mhm,
understood and permissible. If it's earlier in your career, it's understood that maybe you're still kind of feeling things out. That is when people have the greatest salary leaps.
mhm,
So they want to kind of capitalize on that and set a strong foundation. I still think I still see preference from the hiring organization side. Like it's not always going to be like this. I don't think some of these startups are going to fail. Some people are going to retire and change their mind. Some people are going to shoot for a dream job and decide this wasn't all was cracked up to be. I'd rather go back to my former field.
Hmm.
There are still going to be some organizations that value tenure length, not necessarily stagnancy. I'm not talking about 10, 20-year tenures, but if they're consistently seeing these 6, 9 month tenures, and that's coming with the assumption that they are kind of incrementally making more and more and more, you kind of will reach a point where you look like an opportunist, or where you've peaked in terms of what your marketability, what your market value is, and what your demand is, right? And they may not say, I might not get my return on investment for that candidate. I mean, especially for HR, where their their metrics, they're more metrics driven, right?
Hmm.
They're still evaluated based on retention. They're still evaluated based on, am I saving the organization money based on this person being a good fit, being able to train them quickly, get them contributing quickly, and
Hmm.
not necessarily needing cash thrown at them all the time because they're engaged. I don't think that's going to go away long term.
Yeah, well, the idea that is fact. Here's the thing I'm thinking: the only advantage that your company would have in this is if insurance, healthcare isn't so much. But now we're seeing companies not only offer the healthcare and better PTO, or PTO like we were talking about last week. McDonald's is offering PTO. They're offering better benefits and a package and et cetera, et cetera. We can go on and on. But I think the fact that if they don't have that to offer, if they're paying a little bit more on the salary end, why wouldn't it be long term, being that they're going to save money on the back end from not having long term employees? I mean, that's ideal. But I'm just wondering if for somebody who's trying to figure this all out and trying to say, okay, yeah, I really like this company. I want to get promoted within. But the last three people they've gotten that position have all been recruited from the outside. That's, you got to kind of know that bit of intel for you to say, hey, it's feasible for me to get promoted the next time they have opening, or maybe it isn't feasible.
Yeah, that's definitely valuable and something that you'd want to ask about in the
Hmm.
interview, or even asking in your promotions, or your reviews, how likely is this that I would be set up to move on in the organization? And if
Yeah.
you keep hearing, some people have even 2 week reviews. If you keep hearing, oh, well, you need to do this, this, and this, and if they keep changing the milestones, like those are indications that it's not going to happen, and maybe you do need to start looking.
Yeah. And and really you've got to it's got to be a two-pronged approach. Maybe you need to keep your eye on the internal position, but you also got to keep your eye on the MO of whoever's leading that. If they're not hiring within, that your chances are nil, that they're going to promote you, unless of course you have that kind of relationship, or there's some way you've been able to unlock the code, so to speak. So I think that's one thing we'll begin. But that goes to kind of aligns with the other thing um, about what is going to be important for job candidates to negotiate. Not just negotiating. We know that negotiating is going to be necessary, but how about the idea of what's going to be most important to negotiate? Because again, if we're talking about somebody who's a 1099 employee, of course you have more wiggle room to, if you want to extend your prices upwards for every job that you take $10,000 more, that might be feasible in that market, depending upon what the market is, of course. But at the same time, for the regular folk, they may not be thinking on a scalable, with a scalable methodology, so to speak. So, in your opinion, Damien, I'll toss it to you first. Um, I know it depends on the. We all know that it depends on the values of the individual, what they need to negotiate the most. But what seems to be the most interesting that maybe you've seen lately in the past year or so that it's important for job candidates to negotiate?
Well, I don't think it's changed. What I always recommend is keep benefits and everything off to the side
Hmm.
until you have negotiated for the highest possible price that you can pull in the particular position.
Hmm.
However, you have to negotiate with your eyes open, meaning know your value, know uh, what a position in your area is pulling. Uh,
Hmm.
Talk to people at that company if you can to kind of get a feel for salaries above and below. Because if you can find out what the salary is for the person below and above, then in between is where that salary range is. Call their competitor and also get a feel for that. Talk to reps that call on the company. Point being is you need to go in, you need to be informed, you need to be positive, proactive, and strive for a win-win situation. Again,
Hmm.
going back to, if I like you, I may hire you, and if I don't, I won't. And
Hmm.
once you get agreement on salary, that's then when you get creative in terms of other benefits. Because depending on the company, you can negotiate things perhaps over and above what the salary is going to be, especially if you're locked into X
Pay
and that's
grades.
all the right. Um, and you can negotiate for more time off, negotiate perhaps depending on the level for a company car, negotiate for education. There's a whole list of things uh, that actually is in the job search checklist that people can use to click through, but only after you have established what your pay is going to be, because it kind of goes downhill after that. And what I mean by that is establish the money first and everything else comes later.
Yeah. 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 Good advice. And people can find that checklist on the job search checklist, a book Damien wrote 8 years ago, just about now, I think it's been. So
Mhm.
people can find that there. Of course, um, it may be time to update that list. We'll have to talk more
Yes,
about that.
it is. It is time.
Yeah. I'll talk more about that later. Uh, Erica, thoughts?
Sure. You so many great things, Damien. I agree with almost everything that you said. The only thing that I think might be slightly different now is still that on-site remote hybrid for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Not everyone, but for a lot of people, that's more important than the salary right now. And we have
Mhm.
people willing to walk away or take large cuts in order to find something that aligns with
Like
their needs.
25% cuts, like pretty significant.
Right. Yeah, not chump change. But I totally agree beyond that, which is very personal. And we couldn't tell anybody, we couldn't begin to tell anybody how they should make that decision. Um, then it comes to salary and salary over bonuses, right? Because a bonus is
Mhm.
a one time hit, the salary is incremental. And then I would also put more weight right now on growth potential, like kind of even based on our earlier conversation. There was also a Harvard Business Review article that came out a few days ago that was on putting common um, career advice to the test. And they pointed out that based on, money, status, promotions, your career satisfaction, well-being, um, how likely you are to pursue leaving in the future, that actually engagement with growth potential has the highest returns. So that might mean learning and development. That might mean having it written into your contract that they will supply you with a mentor or with meetings with mentors once a month or during lunch, whatever they deem appropriate, and opportunities to change your title and scope. So maybe they are not capable of a formal promotion structure, like especially if it's a smaller organization, but maybe they're willing to let your scope be a little customized depending on your target. So, for example, I've had clients say, I'm in this field, but I'd like to get into graphic design. And so maybe they'd say, okay, well, 10% of your time can be spent on graphic design, or we'll let you shadow in that department. Or another client said they're very motivated by intellectual property and they love innovating. So then that was written into his contract, 1 day a month he is allowed to not work on company projects and just brainstorm, come up with these ideas and submit, patent concepts to them.
Hmm.
Mm. Very interesting. I find that people are also becoming a little bit more savvier as for what's on the plate, and understanding in the long term that maybe training is a little bit more uh, equitable for the person individually rather than the company. In other words, if a company agrees that they can give them a little bit more career development through their industry and kind of even getting ahead, that would pay more dividends in the long term than anything else. Can you imagine? I mean, some training is several $1,000s. That it's a chunk of change for some people. But if you can get the company to agree for that and offer some value for that, and if you happen to have a little bit of a crystal ball, that can pay dividends for years because, like tech and some other industries, they're constantly changing. And I'm not talking about every 10 years. I'm not even talking about every 5 years, but a lot shorter because skills have a very short shelf life now. You
Well,
think
and
about it.
some are only available business to business, like Epic training through healthcare. That's
Uh-huh.
only sponsored through your organ. You
The
can't just
organ,
as a layperson go and sign up for that training.
right.
So, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I really think that if people are really think a little bit deeper about what things will actually look like in their industry. I mean, for a lot of people, they see a job as a job, and it's a restaurant serving the hot food right now, so to speak. They don't care about whether that what that food is going to like there. They know they're going to eat now. That's the way people generally treat their careers. They want to eat now, as opposed to later. If maybe if they decide to trade in that crab shallot for tuna, that maybe later they can have a bigger piece of lobster in the long term. And all that to say that training is really a very, in career development, career advancement, and learning, being a perpetual learner has a lot longer effect on your career for you to eat from for years if you plan to be. So salary to me these days has such a short shelf life because you can make an extra 15 $20,000, and depending upon how much you make now, like I said, 10 to 15% is usually you get automatically just for changing jobs. And that's not hard. And it's very interesting. I see career coaches using their platforms to say that I can get you up to X amount of dollars, because I don't want to name it because somebody's going to think I'm picking on them. But I think it's very interesting that, depending upon what career and what person has, if somebody already has $150,000 salary, they say I can get you 20%. Well, that's a little bit more than 10%, which
Jeez.
really, which really, to some degree, and again, I'm not picking on anybody's particular, but that coach, advisor, resume writer, etc., really didn't do a lot of anything.
Right.
You think
Mhm.
about it from the numbers. So I listened to very carefully the dialogue that actually plays, because we talked about a little bit easier how people market themselves, and when you have to think a little bit critically when you do so, because if somebody should ask a question back, it will say, well, what did that person make before? And
Right.
you're saying, they
20K.
made 20K.
Okay.
They they would have done that without you. You know what I mean? So
Right.
for me, I guess I don't know. I try not to make a big deal out of it because again, I don't want to. I'll be tackling what people are putting on their plate. I don't. That's not my intention. But I think it has a lot to do with again positioning yourself, and the more you position yourself before you get an offer, the better your ask could be a much more strategic, and you can optimize it a whole lot better. Erica, you agree? Disagree?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, and I get, a lot of pundits are looking for, like you were saying, this other person years ago, they're looking for brand distinction and they're looking to flip the script somehow. But then
Right.
sometimes they'll offer a shortcut that is actually detrimental to most job seekers. Like,
Yes.
and one of the ones that's going around right now is that asking for money right away. And I understand there's a temptation to not waste your time through the
Mhm.
recruitment process. But I would say it's better to brand yourself, position yourself through your content, through your networking conversations to make sure you're being offered initially the right types of roles. And then it's more likely that the initial offer will be ballpark relevant to your field. So even if you walk in the organization and they start talking to you and they're like, "Wow, actually I think this person should be director level and not a
Mhm.
manager."
Right.
Then they will be able to say that and not say, "Oh, well, we brought you in for an entry level position because your content was so vague. We just thought you worked in IT."
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And people leverage the wrong things. They
Mhm.
leverage the wrong things. They think that because somebody else did it, that means they can do it. And that's not necessarily true because you have to kind of you have to read in between your own lines what you put out there. You got to look for what you have said, but you also got to look at what you haven't said. And if people look
Right.
more job seekers look at what they haven't said. I mean, you've got to say it. It's got to be obvious. You've got to have content to prove it. You've got to have a career that proves it. If you don't have the career that proves it, at least have the content for whether it's from if you really want to extend your marketing efforts, get on some podcasts and talk about it ad nauseum. Get
Take on
on
some freelancing.
take up some freelancing. Use Haro to get in some newspaper articles to extend that message. I mean, and give yourself some more opportunity because the more opportunities you have to talk about it, the more it'll be easier to convince people. Otherwise, you're hoping that people will get it through the halo that's on top of you, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way.
Well, and
Damien?
usually they believe what you tell them. And if you haven't really told them anything, then
Or like the meme, this cat is doing police dog duty. And said this is what happens when you lie your resume.
True.
I think that that's what happens to people get. So I really do. And that happened to me. I remember one time I had some access experience in doing access,
okay.
but it wasn't the experience the person was looking for. So when
Hmm.
I got there, yeah, I got some access, but when I got tested on it, boy, that was really embarrassing. But all that to say, take from my lesson is that yeah, you could say one thing, but when you're tested,
Yeah.
what does it show? And you can get ahead of that if you're able to talk about, saying, hey, I thought I had this and I really didn't have it. And so I started doing this. Then people get it. Authentic. I can follow your I can follow your journey. And that makes sense for us to look into you. Damien?
Mhm. And uh, I couldn't help but think about a time that I was negotiating for a position. I had clearly hit the top
Hmm.
and it was still
Ah,
low. And I said, have you ever thought about taking two positions and combining them? And then we can resume conversation on Monday. And that's exactly what they did.
Hmm.
And as a result, I was able to take it up a whole new to a whole new level. And I think what we're all saying is when you're negotiating, make sure you're telling the truth. Make sure you can back up everything that you're saying on your resume. And also, you need to make it a win-win situation because, if you immediately bring salary to the forefront and bang out saying, this is what I need, you've denied yourself the opportunity to get to know the people that you're interviewing with and get a feel for the culture of the company. I mean, hell,
Mhm.
you can go in somewhere and make 3 times what you're making in your current position. But if you go into a situation and the culture is really, really tough, um, you may be making all this money and you may have moved from a different city to do this, but you're going to be miserable.
Mhm.
So go with the process as we have talked about it and work everything through and delay, in my opinion, delay talking about salary for as long as you can so that you can get to know them and they can get to know you. And if they want to immediately talk about salary, then you need to be able to dance, is my feeling.
Well, and sometimes the recruiter won't let you, or sometimes the hiring manager says point blank, like, I know what you're doing, give me a number. And if that's the case, then like you said, you offer the range, the reasonable range, and then you can scope out, how much room is
Mhm.
there, right? And
Mhm.
then making it clear, I'd still like to learn more about this role, continuing that conversation. That doesn't mean that when you get down to the line and you're up to the final offer point that you can't say, well, now that I know more about the role, I think based on this, this, and this, these three accomplishments in my work history, or these three qualifications that you have that are especially relevant to the role, I think I deserve this to this range, and you can push it.
Mhm.
So, but you're right. The ultimate, when we're getting down to the offer stage, you don't want to start negotiating before you've had a chance to prove yourself.
Right, or negotiate when you can't prove yourself,
Exactly.
Mhm.
and that's even
Then you're just
worse.
out. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So we're coming to the top of the hour. Erica, thank you very much for
That happens so
this
fast.
very value-filled hour. Fantastic
Absolutely.
show. And thank you, Damien, for joining us. Erica, do you have anything going on that people should know about?
Sure. I've actually got a presentation coming up next week in the Chicago area.
Oh,
I'll be posting about it on my LinkedIn profile. And also check us out on Job Search Journey, a
oh,
new
okay.
platform for job search tools.
Right, you got some materials up there that people can buy at a very reduced rate and be able to use that for the job search. Very nice,
Good.
Damien. What you got come out? Did your Consumer Report article come out yet?
It has not. I'm thinking it'll be December or January. So
Okay, okay,
fingers crossed.
probably yeah. You're going to be published in the magazine itself, I guess, right? Okay,
Correct.
so there's that 3 month lead when you get featured in a magazine. I get it. Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Uh, Job Seeker Nation next week on Wednesday, 1 p.m. And we're back here next Friday with guests. Sonal Ball is going to be with us next week.
Yay!
If you have not checked out Supercharged Fridays on YouTube or on LinkedIn, you're missing a treat. And you could probably, at this point, she recorded a show for today, so you can go to her YouTube channel, look up Supercharged Fridays. She has more than 80,000 subscribers to that channel and a
Wow.
very engaged audience. So definitely, this is you're going to get a lot of value next week. We're going to be talking about all things interviewing next week, so it's going to be a hot show. And I was fortunate to be on that show last spring. I think it was last spring. Fantastic. I think we ended up going past the hour. We went an hour and a half on that show. There
Wow.
was a lot of engagement and it was so much fun. A lot of fun at that particular time. So Again, thank you very much for joining us on the Modern Job Search Checklist. Um, there seemed to be a failure to LinkedIn to broadcast for several
Oh,
different reasons. One of them I goofed on the times Erica pointed out. I didn't know that till today, but apparently it didn't hit there. But we will post some excerpts from that. But it hit the YouTube channel. It hit the Facebook, and it did hit Twitter. So if you want to hit any of my timelines to see the replay, you can do so. So that's the end of the show. Thank you very much. Peace in the Valley of Love. We'll see you next week at 1 p.m. Eastern.